Hello and welcome to the East Lampeter Township Public Meeting. All participants are now informed that this meeting is being recorded. This meeting is also being offered virtually utilizing Zoom, which is a cloud-based platform for remote video and audio conferencing. The Zoom application is free to the public. The general public is therefore able to join the meeting by connection through the internet or by calling in by phone. The public is also able to observe the meeting on the Township's YouTube channel. Please continue to check the Township website calendar for any updates related to these public meetings. Agendas for these public meetings will also be available on the Township's website. Please be reminded that this meeting is being video and audio recorded and will be posted to the Township's YouTube channel for viewing. The meeting will now proceed with the chairman calling the meeting to order and identifying all other members present in the meeting room and those joining the meeting via Zoom. The chairman will then confirm those members joining by Zoom can be heard.
So good evening. I'm Darrell Seasalz, Chairman of the East Lampeter Township Planning Commission. Also present this evening here, Jerry Huskin on the Planning Commission. We also have two other members, Randy Patterson and Sarah Ryder, who are Zoomed in. So we do have a quorum. We can't have an official meeting. We have 4 of the 5. The 5th member is out sick this evening. Also here, Colin Seasalz, our zoning officer, Dave Stinopoli, and Alicia Hare for the meeting this evening. Randy and Sarah, you can hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. With that said, we'll start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Stand and join. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This item of business is approval of the minutes of the October 11th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. It is the October meeting. We did not hold a meeting in November for one items. So we skipped November. So we're here now. Our last meeting of October. Are there any comments or revisions to the minutes of October 11th? Just, Sarah, I have a question for you. Were you here in October or were you Zoomed? Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I was present in the meeting room.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. 95% sure.
If there are no other changes or not any changes or comments, I'll look for a motion to approve. So moved. We have the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have the motion and second. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, unanimous. Thank you. Well, so next item is old business. None this evening. We move then to new business. First item under new business, the High Properties Warehouse Lot 5, Little Road in Franklin Boulevard. Final land development plan.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Tony Sykes and I'm here to present our proposal for the industrial flex building project on Lot 5 at Greenfield. I'd like to start by introducing our project team. With me tonight is my colleague from my associates, Mike Rush. Mike is the project manager for the project. Also here tonight and well known to the Planning Commission, Dave Miller from R2, our civil engineer, and of course, last but not least, Claudia Shank, our legal counsel from McNeese. What I'd like to do tonight is request a Planning Commission recommendation for approval of the Lot 5 land development plans and our waiver of modification request. In terms of format tonight, I'll do a brief introduction to the project. I'm going to then turn to Claudia for an overview of the chronology leading up to tonight's meetings and our requested action items. And then Dave Miller will give a little more detail on the land development plans and provide as much detail as is needed on the waiver and modifications. I'm hopeful that a number of these waivers will not require much conversation and detail. In terms of introduction to the plan, Lot 5, I'll just give you a brief overview. Lot 5 is 21.4 acres. It's within the BP zoning district. It's land, urban growth boundary, and it's served by public water and sewer. The building proposed on Lot 5 is an industrial flex building. It can be flexed for up to 4 users. It will have 32-foot clear ceiling. It will be ESFR sprinklered. As you may know, that system is a very efficient and very effective system. It allows tenants to store a much higher volume of material within the space. The docks are rear facing for design aesthetic. In keeping with our protocols at Greenfield, there will be no outdoor storage in this building. And in terms of facade, the building will have an attractive 10-foot masonry brick exterior. Above the brick will be insulated metal panels. And the entry feature will have a higher expansive brick for a more enhanced aesthetic at the entry feature, the ground face CMU. In short, this building, and I can be confident telling you and assuring you this building is every bit the quality you'd expect from High and will be a great counterpoint to its slightly larger cousin, which was approved on Lot 4. That's a 229,000 square foot building. This building is 207,000 square feet, just about 210,000 square feet. So very similar in terms of design as to what we approved on Lot 4, and certainly a great complement to the constructed Patty Stevens Automotive Center just to the southeast on Lot 3. With that, I'm going to turn to Claudia for the background on the chronology.
Evening. So this is our first time before the Planning Commission on this particular plan. We do have the David Miller Associates review letter dated November 7th. We'll be making reference to that this evening, as well as the Lancaster County Planning Department review letter, which is dated July 1st. In terms of the presentation this evening, our intent is to start by allowing Dave to walk you through the plan, talk about what's proposed in a little bit more detail, and then to walk through the waiver and modification requests. There are 10 total waiver and modification requests that are reflected in David Miller's letter. I'd like to start by just going through those requests, which I don't think will require a lot of discussion. 7 of the requests are recommended for approval, with little or no conditions being placed on those recommendations. So our intent is to run through those 7 waiver modification requests first. There are then 3 requests which may require some additional discussion. I think we'll take those last if it suits the Planning Commission. There's waiver of widening and curbing along Willow Road. Those are 2 separate waiver requests, but really can be discussed together. There's also request to defer installation of a pathway along Willow Road, which would be provided in lieu of sidewalk. And finally, we are proposing more than 125% of the minimum required parking on this site. And that does require approval from the Board of Supervisors. And we're asking the Planning Commission to make a recommendation that the board grant that approval as well this evening. So with that by way of background, I'll have Dave come forward, walk through the plan, and then begin going over the waiver request.
Good evening. Tony and Claudia generally walk through this, and I'll point out some things as we move forward. But this is part of the greater 100-acre campus, business park campus of Greenfield Road, Willow Road, and then the newly constructed Ben Franklin Boulevard, which goes through that tract. The previous development within that business park was an expansion of the Eastwood Village residential community. Thaddeus Stevens is constructed and running. And then, as Tony mentioned, there was a previously approved industrial warehouse, about 229,000 square feet that has been approved, but is pending construction. That's known as Lot 4 over here. Greenfield North, that you're very familiar with, is on the other side of this tributary here. So we're focused on Lot 5, which is a single warehouse building, a little under 210,000 square feet. It has two accesses, both of them off of Ben Franklin Boulevard. So no new accesses off of Willow Road. Pedestrian parking in the front of the building, paralleling to Ben Franklin Boulevard building, and then the loading area in the back of the building. What's not shown on this particular plan, but would be of interest, is fact that it's part of, and I'll pull up the stormwater management and grading. Get a little more flavor of this. But with Greenfield North being to the east, there is the riparian corridor from this tributary that's been planted and will be enhanced as part of the Greenfield North. And then a landscape berm to provide further screening between the residential and the industrial component has already been installed under a previous permit and planted. So that'll mature and provide a nice screening, again, between the uses. And then this plan will have a stormwater management basin, wetland type of facility infiltration, as well as a rain garden through here to meet the stormwater management components, of course, tying into the public water and public sewer, the main campus. Any questions on that before?
You have the grading plan up. There's a lot of contour lines at Benjamin Franklin and Willow. Is the building higher or lower than those two roads?
Yeah, this grading will actually go down
Okay.
off of Ben Franklin. So it sits down a bit, the parking will, about 8 feet, I want to say.
From the number of lines, it looks like it sets lower than that from Willow.
Yes, right. So this, and
Is that a 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 5-to-1?
these are 3-to-1 slopes. So it's not as severe. These are 1 foot contours. So it looks a little more severe than it actually is, but nicely graded. And there will be landscaping. There'll be trees planted along Willow, additional trees for screening through there, as well as the embankment that's going to provide that visual block barrier there.
There will be some landscaping. As you're probably aware, within the past year, we had a severe accident along that road. I was just concerned if somebody ran off the road, would it be hazardous or a car rollover, or if there would be some need to protect that area, or not necessarily a guide rail, but maybe a guide rail, but just if you're dropping 10 feet, that's even at a 3-to-1, that's a lot. Just from a safety standpoint of people traveling on. And I think we've all seen Willow Road is cars traveling in there much faster than the posted speed limit, even on a normal day. Yeah.
Right, but this would be outside of the clear zone. It's outside of the right of way, that grading.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So we do have the,
If I may, one other. The elevation of the loading docks relative to the housing on the other side. Distance between that first houses and the loading docks and relative elevation and the landscaping. I'm guessing your landscaping will be,
There's a significant screen, yeah.
okay, because the trucks are gonna all be backing into the other parties. I don't know.
Yeah,
if this is-
Dave, you might mention the berm there too, with the,
And that,
well,
right, that was the purpose of the landscape berm. This berm is, I'll say 8 foot high, then significant tree heights, like a variation of tree heights when it's mature.
yeah,
there.
the concern if there's any early morning or late night use, the trucks are gonna be backing in and headlights, et cetera. But, and I know I is sensitive to
yeah.
the impact on residential, so.
Yes. And that was the reason for this berm being installed early, so it could get mature immediately.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do have the November 7th DMA letter. As Paulie mentioned, the first section of the letter is running through the waivers, modifications that we are requesting. I think the more basic ones, we're asking for a waiver of preliminary plan to go straight to final. A waiver of plan scale so that we can show the information with more clarity. We'll come back to number 3. Number 4 is a request that we're in lieu of installing concrete sidewalk along Willow Road, that we would install a bituminous path. And that would be consistent with the path that's being installed on Greenfield North, kind of that cohesive walking trail system. The sidewalk along Ben Franklin Boulevard will be concrete, but then as we get to Willow, it would be bituminous. So that's a waiver request of the township standards. Number 5.
Miller's letter also mentioned a condition that it would be property owner maintained.
Yes, right. And that's how it is with Greenfield North too. So that's consistent with that. Number 5 is a request for varying offsets from the sidewalk. The township standard is typically 1 foot off the right-of-way line, which we are providing for the majority of that. But then at the culvert, that's part of a bigger discussion that we'll have, then we are getting closer to the roadway there and protecting it with guide rail for safety purposes at that point. So that is a request as well. Number 6 is the curbing of Willow that we'll get back to. Number 7 is 7, 8, and 9 are related to stormwater management, all of which DMA recommends approval of. Loading ratios for stormwater management, width of the spillway, and time to complete review water, for instance, there. And then number 10 is a request to defer the installation of the pedestrian path along Willow from this point all the way along to the west there. So knowing that we want to talk about widening, curbing, and pedestrian path, before we do that, are there any questions on any of the other requests or comments that you'd like to talk to?
Here's not from this side of the table. Thank you.
So Willow Road right now is classified as a collector road. It's a rural setting. Pavement width from center line over is 11.5 to 12 feet, something along those lines on both sides of the roadway. And we are requesting a waiver of the widening requirement of Willow Road, which would be 18 feet from center line, is technically what the ordinance would require for a collective road. 12-foot lane, 6-foot shoulder. And we received a waiver of that requirement for Greenfield North portion of Willow Road, and we're requesting the same waiver for those improvements on along Lot 5. Several reasons for that. First and foremost, I think, is to maintain the the rural feel, the rural nature of this area. The center line of the boundary line for the urban growth boundary is the center line of Willow Road. So there's no foreseen development north of the road. There's an agreement that water service will not be provided by the city on that side of the road. So it's likely going to be in that rural condition for the very long term. So from that standpoint, keeping the visual of the rural road, also all the development within the business park prohibits truck traffic from utilizing Willow Road or from exiting out onto Willow Road. So they'll all use Ben Franklin Boulevard, go out to what will be a signalized intersection at Greenfield Road and utilize the site there. So we're not introducing truck traffic to Willow Road for that. And it was the sense of the Planning Commission and the board to waive that, and no sense of desire to widen Willow Road. From a curving standpoint,
with respect to lot 1, there was no, the decision was to grant the waiver.
yes, right.
So, in this case, on this request for lot 5, staff supported, DMA supported the waiver request.
Well, DMA, as they did for lot 1, they are suggesting a deferral of the
Okay,
widening.
I'm sorry, they suggested it. Yeah. In our conversation with staff,
Right. Staff, the planning commission, the board, they all agreed to the waiver rather than deferral of the widening. We're talking about for lot 1, Greenfield North. And so the DMA letter speaks to, again, a deferral. We continue to ask for the waiver for consistency's sake.
and in a recent conversation with staff, what I heard was, Colin, I think was part of that would be well received in terms of the waiver request. Sorry.
Yeah, I believe in the previous plan, we had considerable discussion back and forth on which way to go, and I believe the commission and the township was thinking we'd like to maintain that rural character, and it may help to slowly speed down on that road not being widened.
Yeah.
And made more of a highway and keep it more of a rural road to help with maintaining the posted speed. As well as the other reasons you've said, truck traffic's not permitted, et cetera, so.
Yep, okay, and that's just consistent with Willow Road on each side of the business park campus as well, maintaining that uniformity. And that ties into our request for a waiver of curbing as well.
Well, stop.
Yeah, sure.
Under number 3, then we're saying that waiver should be granted, and it was in the previous situation. That was on the board at that time.
Yes.
Is that what we're saying?
It was way for Greenfield North.
We're talking about it.
Yeah.
Lot 1, which was Greenfield North, that wasn't.
And we can change our mind, but previously we had, and as Tony mentioned that EMA had suggested a deferral. But after some discussion and.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, recommended.
Thank you.
Ultimately approved by the supervisor.
And along with that is the request to waive the curbing of Willow Road. And for many of the same reasons. Again, to keep the rural nature of the roadway, for consistency on either side of the business park. The only curbing is on the right-hand turn lane off of Willow onto Greenfield North. It's just a short stretch where it's widened for a right turn lane, and that's curved. Otherwise, there's not curbing on Willow. So the waiver would maintain consistency with that. And then, as Darrell mentioned, it's a safety issue as well from the speed, the wider the road, or you improve it to the extent of putting curbing in, it kind of encourages faster speeds. What we would do if we did have to install curbing would be that we would install 14 feet off of the center line. That provides a minimum distance from the center line for travel and a couple of feet of shoulder, let's call it. But even that, and the nature of that slightly wider road might encourage speeds. But also the curb produces a vertical barrier where there is none now. Drivers sway just a little bit off of the path. Right now they go on the grass. With a curb, they're going to hit that curb and perhaps jerk back into the center line or jump the curb and don't know what. So we think from a safety standpoint, it's better not to have the curb. From a drainage and a safety standpoint, if we did install curbing along Willow Road, we would need to install storm sewer, storm pipe, all those appurtenances. And rather than have that water sheet across now and much of it get absorbed into the grass, now it would be trapped by the curb, go into the inlets, and then we would have to take that water down to the culvert. At this point, we can get into that discussion. But again, instead of allowing the water off the road, now you're kind of trapping it. And even with inlets, you have a very large storm. Those inlets don't capture 100% of the storm. You bypass, it could back up into the road. Even the township ordinance allows, I'll say, flooding of half of the lane width. And if that were to happen, now you're forcing cars into the center of the road. So, not to mention freezing that could occur along the flow line. So we think from an engineering standpoint, as well as a safety standpoint, it's preferable not to have the curb there.
This would be a bit of a departure from the approval on lot one. In that case, this was deferred basically at the pleasure of the board, subject to a deferral agreement. We do not yet have a deferral agreement, correct?
That's correct.
So I don't think any further action would be needed to be taken on the lot one approval. It would be consistent just to not require it if this were waived at this section. So I did want to make that distinction and out of respect for the planning commission, let you know this is a little bit different. But we struggled with this one, honestly. Dave listed about 7 reasons why we think curbing isn't a good idea here, and I'm struggling to find good reasons for it. So, you know, the only thing that I came up with is you get a better definition for the road, a clearer definition, but that cuts both ways. So those are really our reasons for the request.
Which curbing was deferred in the first?
All
Along a lot one
Greenfield.
Greenfield North. Along Willow Road was deferred until it was kind of wide open as to when the township might.
You might want to mention about the utility poles.
Yeah.
Right, and so right, there are there's 5 utility poles right along the edge of pavement, right off the edge of pavement, that would have to be relocated for that even minor widening to install the curb. So that's working with PPL to actually get that done, and the cost thereof is extensive, and the time to get that accomplished. So several poles here. There's one at the near the culvert as well that would be required. And just to point out, to jump back to the stormwater, fairly level road here. We're estimating inlets every 125 feet, which is a pretty good frequency. And just keeping in mind that all of that, this will ultimately be owned and maintained by the township. So, yeah, that entire storm sewer curb, all of that would need to be maintained. And one more thing, that as we're thinking through this, think about snow plowing right now. If you don't have a curb, you can push it off to the side. If you have a curb, now the plow is going to stay a little bit off the curb. So now you have that snow right up against the curb, which also reduces the effective width. And maintenance, there's maintenance for the township as well. So, yeah, we did think through this, this request. We feel quite strongly that it's a better condition to leave the road in its current condition. We did not, as Tony said, we really didn't think of a benefit to installing the curb through there. So we're just at this point asking for a straight waiver of that installation.
Daryl, can I ask a question?
Yes, Randy.
So just going back to the consistency argument. So the consistency with the street widening would be because a waiver was granted for the other 2, Greenfield North and Lot 1. In this case, deferrals were granted for Greenfield North and for Lot 1. Is that correct?
Yes.
So just from a consistency standpoint, would you be agreeable to a deferral on the curb? So we are consistent with the other 2, or would you go back to the supervisors and seek a change of that deferral to a waiver for Lot 1 and Greenfield North?
Yeah, I think I can address that. I don't think there would be a need to revisit the Greenfield North approval. I mean, you certainly could, but it's really at the board's pleasure. So, I think the board could choose just not to enforce that deferral agreement, not to request that curb be installed along Lot 1, and that would be consistent with what we're doing here. But it is a deviation from what was done previously. I think as we consider the implications of installing curb now or in the future, the costs just seem to greatly outweigh the benefits, which is why we're suggesting to do something different here.
But the only reason I suggest revisiting is boards of supervisors change. So today you have supervisors who would continue to defer that, but there may be a time where you wouldn't. A waiver would not create that issue for you.
And I don't think we'd be opposed to just revisiting it if that was the board's pleasure.
Okay, it's something for staff to think about. I think just so we can be consistent across the board. I'd rather not have this hole where we granted a waiver, we have deferrals on the other 2 sides. Let's do one or the other.
Yeah, and we'll see what the motion is, but I summarize Randy's, which he did very well. We would be inconsistent to not do a deferral, which keeps all of it equal. So and as you mentioned, it is at the supervisor's pleasure or wishes if they exercise that deferral or not. Some deferrals do get exercised, probably many more don't, but it depends on the timing and when you move forward. And if things change, whether boards change or use of that, property. On the other side is agriculture. On the other side of Willow, which is another thing that hadn't been mentioned, but another reason to keep Willow rural. But a curbing may or may not be appropriate. I mean, I know some work is being done on Willow because of drainage concerns, and some of those have been improved already. There were some drainage concerns along other sections of Willow that. So, and sometimes curbing works and other times it works against you. But to keep the opportunity consistent for a future decision would probably be awkward to have a waiver on some and a deferral on other. And be inconsistent to be consistent. I mean, inconsistent to be inconsistent. Be better to be consistent with what's done on each of these.
Perhaps we should have requested a waiver on the prior lot one plan as well. We didn't. That is something we could revisit, but I'd hate to, require it here when there's really not any benefit that we can see associated with doing that just because it was done previously.
Yeah, and it'd be nice if we could go back and address those two without another formal process. Yeah.
Daryl, can I just make a comment? Can you hear me? I guess my concern is right now, we don't see a benefit to curbing, but my concern is in the future, if there is a benefit to having curbing and we don't have the flexibility because a waiver was granted. So that's a little bit of my concern with the granting of the waiver versus the deferral.
I agree with Randy on the consistency issue. I think it's something, if you feel it's not appropriate, maybe revisiting that other issue would be something to do at this time. Well,
Any further comment?
Just let's clarify we did get a waiver in case there's any question about that on the widening.
Right.
It was only.
Yes.
Right, so just to rehash, lot one, we received a waiver of the widening, deferral of the curbing. Lot five, we're requesting waiver of both the widening.
Let's go to the last. Then.
And just one last thing on that, we did provide the full required right of way, the 30-foot half width. That was actually part of the prior phase of the campus. So the township will have that full right of way available to them in the future. So the third component of this overall discussion is the pedestrian path and the 4-foot by 6-foot box culvert that is in this point at the stream. So the flow is from north to south. This flows down and goes through under the bridge that was constructed as part of the business campus. So we have some environmental constraints on this. One was the floodplain. We have wetlands. We received a joint permit for the bridge work, which affects this entire corridor up through here. That restriction goes generally up to the right of way of Willow Road. The culvert ends pretty much at the end of the paving, not too far from the edge of the paving currently. So for us to install a pedestrian path through there and connecting it to Greenfield North would require, we're estimating about an 11-foot extension of that culvert, which we think is feasible to do so. As I said earlier, we are proposing guide rail along that area where we're getting closer to the pavement to protect pedestrian traffic in that area. Assuming no widening, assuming no curving of the Willow. When we discussed that with the township, we learned that the township is also looking at some drainage improvements on this culvert, as was mentioned. And so the thought is that any of those improvements should be considered together. One for design, for permitting. And we understand that the township side of that is in the very early stages. And so rather than the developer coming in and doing improvements on the culvert in order to get the pedestrian path installed, and then perhaps the township do something different, even replace the culvert altogether, it would undo all of that. So our request for deferral is to defer the installation of this pedestrian path along Willow, including along that box culvert, until all the permitting is in place. From both sides, from ISTAM to township. And then it can be one comprehensive project up there. And that would not hold up then the development of the main body of the parcel. So that is a deferral request. DMA recommend, they agreed with the deferral request with a condition that a time frame be set for that. Again, it's open-ended as to what that could mean from a design and a permitting standpoint. So put a time condition on there. And then if it did not happen, if that work was never approved, then to look at an alternate to this connection here. And so in large extent, that's what we're asking for. We would install the concrete walk up to this point, and rather than install a dead end path to nowhere, just not install it at all up to this point, and then any pedestrians could cross over, or they could just retrace their steps or go to the other side of Ben Franklin and continue their journey. So that is the request. We're back in, I don't know if we have a time frame to suggest for that limitation. Certainly that detail could be worked out. We do have a thought for the alternate in case that permitting never went through or it was for an extended time, which I will show you. At this point. So the alternate suggestion would be, rather than continue the full length of Willow Road, circle that back, put the path on the berm of the basin. You get the view of the landscape berm and the riparian corridor through there. And then that would loop back to Ben Franklin Boulevard here and provide that circuitous loop through there. So we think that could be a workable solution, an alternate to all of this work here. And that would mimic really what is proposed on Greenfield North on the other side of the trip. Getting the orientation the same. So here's that corridor. Greenfield North also provides a loop going around the development. So that alternate solution would provide two loops, both of them running through the or along the corridor. So that's one thought that we had for an alternate for consideration.
Comments from this side of the table?
Darrell, this is Randy. I mean, I'd support the removal of the time frame issue, knowing that there are multiple players in awarding permits, some at the state level. So I think it would be challenging to put a time frame into a condition. And the fact that you have a contingency plan in place, I think I could support just granting the deferral request along with the deferral agreement.
Jerry?
That was good. I was trying to clarify. If they were contesting having the time frame in or wanted it removed.
I think Randy captured it very well. Randy captured it very well. Because he could, I cannot say that. Different overlapping permits for the constructor, timeframes at the stage that none of us can control with predictability, and we have this alternative plan. So I think Randy captured it very, very well. That we have a deferral agreement for sure. So I think it's subject to the deferral agreement.
I agree with Randy, but have another thought in that we all seem to work better when we have deadlines and we get things done, which we have some chuckles, but yes, so it'd be nice in a sense to keep it moving, and there are other issues that the township has with that culvert and drainage that the township needs to address. And I'd almost like to get a deadline to keep the township along with you moving to get it done without putting unnecessary. So my thought was, if, and I'm not sure when you're planning to go to the supervisors, if there could be some discussion with staff, if they have any idea of a timeline to address their concerns, I'm sure you would be very willing to work with them in their timeline. Unbeknownst to me, I don't know what it is.
Honestly, I think we'd be in a position to move. We're not going to need the. I think the timeline only muddies this. To be honest, if this would be subject to a deferral agreement. We'd be sitting down with the township working through the issues. I just can't say if they've identified funds, if they've identified their design criteria. And yeah, that speaks to your question about is this open-ended, but we've got a project we want to move here. And we're going to sit down with them as we have on other things to work out.
And it could be open-ended or even, if it's a 3-year or 5-year, if something doesn't happen, that then the alternate route would be implemented now or in a certain time period. That would be the fail safe that we have a completed trail. If you will.
Can't that be part of the deferral agreement?
Yeah, Darrell, I was going to suggest that language could be included in the deferral agreement, that if the
Yes,
permits were not obtained, as opposed to putting it into the land development plan approval.
That's what I thought.
yeah, and that's, that was part of this recommendation from Dave Mellor Associates, that a timeline, but part of the deferral agreement. So the language could be modified to, and would be included, my understanding, in the deferral agreement. So it's understood what the deferral includes and any conditions. So, but I can't speak for staff. I'm not, because I don't know the discussion on their end of what they're looking at as you said, the budget for it to allow for the time to do it, et cetera. And then the other whole part, that third party of permits is another.
No, I agree. I think the question in front of the planning commission right now is whether or not it should be deferred. All the details as far as timing, whatnot, can be hashed out with staff at a later date.
But that's acceptable.
Refresh me with, the township has standards for sidewalk width. I believe you typically go a little wider with your bituminous, or am I?
It's 5 foot wide,
It's
which
5.
matches the township standard.
The township's 5, okay. For some reason, I was thinking you went a little bit more.
The path is 5.
Yeah, I was thinking there were 6, but I'm not sure. For season, my visual is that they look a little wider. And I wasn't sure what you used, if you plow them, et cetera. 6 would probably be more easier to plow without tearing up the sod or the turf on one side or the other to clear them. Anyway, as you know, your trail systems get used. Yeah, and 5's a little narrow if you're passing in opposite directions. So Any other comments?
Yeah, I can move on to the parking question and maybe skim through the rest of the review letter if you like.
Just a question on the curbing. You're curbing all of the rest, parking areas
Yes.
and all that rest,
Right, that,
and actually putting inlets in and et cetera along the. Have you found that to be? Typically, you like to have sheet drainage, but you're putting inlets all along the curb on the loading dock side? Or is that
yes.
to keep the trucks off the grass? I mean,
Well, it's a matter of controlling really the stormwater itself. So all the pavement slopes away from the building toward the exterior of the loading area. And that is collected into inlets and then discharged at 3 different points within the basin. So you have the outlet control at that point, as opposed to well, I mean, for one thing, the ordinance requires it to be curbed. So we didn't think it was worth asking a waiver of that. And so we did what we typically always do and we curbed it.
yeah, it's just the reverse of the discussion on Willow Road for curbing, so.
Well, the difference here, yeah, I mean, this is a public roadway, fairly narrow, as opposed to a loading dock.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes to the intent of Willow that we've discussed
Yeah,
versus.
Yeah. Because you're gonna plow the parking lot and the road, et cetera,
Yeah.
all the same issues as you have on a roadway. And you have circulation along the end of the building? Well, where you have it, no, right there, yeah.
I was gonna try to get rid of some of the clutter.
Um,
Yeah. Yes, this is one way through there, and primarily that is for fire access. So we've run the templates, we've coordinated this with both fire companies. And they are good with what we're showing.
You're showing that one way and your dark area is the heavy duty
Heavy duty
pavement.
pavement.
I was just wondering why you didn't continue the heavy duty through the car parking if you're gonna run trucks around there?
Well,
Or
so
the tractor trailers
yeah,
coming.
tractor trailers will use this driveway and come to the back. And there's room for them to go back out the same way. So we don't really want to intermingle pedestrian vehicles with the truck traffic. This is really emergency.
Yeah, you have a heavy duty pavement on the north side of the building, so.
We do for
Yeah.
fire trucks.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thank you.
Question about the curbing. So I think you mentioned earlier that there's curbing that was installed along the intersection of Willow and Greenfield. Is that correct?
There's existing curbing on Greenfield Road
Okay,
up to Willow, and there's the curb returns and then it ends.
okay. So but there's no real curbing on Willow.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, just to give a
The other way. Yeah.
fully accurate answer. Greenfield Road is curved on both sides. On our side, it wraps around and ends right here. On the other side, on the west side, it continues around for this, I'll say 100 feet or so for that turning lane. And then it ends there. So that's really the only stretch that's curved.
And just for my information, like, why is there a benefit of doing that, like right at that intersection? I'm just looking at that compared to Ben Franklin Boulevard. Obviously, Greenfield Road's a much heavier trafficked area, road, but I'm just curious why that curbing's there and it's not, nothing's like that proposed on Ben Franklin Boulevard.
Well, Ben Franklin Boulevard is curved.
Yep,
Again, that's a township, that'll be a township road, so that meets the township standards, both in terms of width and in construction. So that's a wider road than Willow Road even. So,
I believe, Sarah, there is curbing on Ben Franklin, and you do the same radius onto Willow. So it's done the same there,
Okay,
is on Greenfield and Willow.
okay, that was my question. Like, so are those intersections are pretty similar with curbing?
yeah, right. And this is actually, so Ben Franklin Boulevard has been installed as part of the previous
Yeah.
phase of the business park. So Ben Franklin Boulevard is complete.
Yeah, and then it's curbed along Willow, just right at that intersection.
Just going around, just going around to the curb return. we call
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
And anything else on this?
Yeah, we're gonna.
We can jump onto the parking issue if you like. I think it's be a quick discussion, but the zoning ordinance for warehouse stipulates 1 parking space for every 2 employees on the largest shift. So you have 2 employees, 1 parking space, which just, you know, in practical sense is just not enough. This site is projected to have about 125 employees. And so by ordinance, that would be 63 parking spaces. And again, just not practical. Maybe that works for a city situation, but we believe it's not enough here. The ordinance allows you to increase that by 25%. We are asking for 114 spaces, which is 181% of the minimum required by the zoning ordinance. So that is just shy of 1 per employee. It seems reasonable. If there's shift work going on and you've got overlap of shifts, all of those things come into play when designing a site. So we feel that the 114 spaces is adequate to meet the need. DMA suggested that we provide some research from ITE, which we did that and we submitted it. If you have that in front of you, we've got the ITE parking generation manual. And for 125 employees, the average number of parking spaces would be 85, but the average minimum, if you will, and then the 85 percentile, in other words, not the largest, but a reasonable, comfortable number would be 142 spaces. And we are at 114 spaces. So we fall somewhere between the average and 85 percentile with our request there. The zoning ordinance does allow the supervisors to approve a greater number. It does not need to go through the zoning hearing board, but it is something that the board has the ability to approve. So again, we feel comfortable that's a good number. It's not excessive. As you can see, it's a double bay of parking along most of the front of the building. It's not a sea of parking.
Will you be running more than 1 shift in this building?
All likely, yes.
There'll be overlapping shifts, if you will, that would necessitate the potential of, the next shift coming in before the current shift leaves, which creates an issue for parking,
That building can be configured small. Not all the shifts are.
Yeah, other than that, the DMA letter, we have no issues with any of the comments. We can address those. We do have a letter from the county planning department from July 1st.
If you're okay with the, I just, there were. If I can find it. There were 7 subdivision land development. We don't have any issue with complying with those. And then there's stormwater management, there were 5, and you don't have any issue in complying with those 5. And the county letter,
County letter from July 1st is generally a will comply with this, some caveats just to make sure we're communicating 100%. Number 1, speaks to the signature block. We made that change. Number 2, there were street trees that were planted along Ben Franklin Boulevard here. And some of them need to be removed. We actually had probably most of them being removed as a part of this project originally at the time the department reviewed the letter, but now we are replacing the majority of those trees through here. But there's places at the driveways, site triangles, that type of thing that we're not able to replace those trees. I will point out that those trees were planted voluntarily by High. It's not a township requirement for street trees. So it's kind of an added benefit that they put any trees in at all, frankly. And they will be replacing the trees as they are able to once this gets regraded. So I think in the spirit of things, we're complying with that, but just wanted to point out that subtlety. Number 3, yes. Number 4, regarding bicycle parking, we do have a note that bicycle parking will be provided, or bicycle facilities. Number 5, we addressed. Number 6 is we expanded on the note on the plans to say that the sign cannot, talk about the site sign, it cannot be located within a clear site triangle or other easements. So, of course, any of that signage needs to comply with zoning and get the appropriate permits from the township. So I think all of these either complied to the letter or just nuances. We did address these comments, submitted them back to the township, and DMA did not have any further comments on the county planning department letter. So that's all I have.
thank you. Any comments from the Planning Commission?
None for me.
Larry, you're okay? Any comments from the audience in reference to this plan? Seeing and hearing none.
So I'll make the motion if I can get it out without coughing.
I believe we're ready for the motion.
Okay. See if I can do this. So I make a motion that we provide. Okay, so it's High Properties Warehouse Lot 5, Willow Road and Ben Franklin Boulevard. That the waivers and modifications requested by High Properties in the November 7th letter from David Miller Associates be approved with the following changes. on the modification, excuse me, on the waiver request for the Willow Road, rather than a deferral as proposed by David Miller Associates, that the waiver request be granted. On the issue of curbing, that in this case, we follow the David Miller Associates with the explanation that it is to remain consistent with prior approvals for Greenfield North and Lot 1. So a deferral would be granted and a deferral agreement put in place. And that on relationship to the pedestrian path along Willow Road, that the deferral be granted without condition. And that all other items related to zoning, subdivision and land development, and stormwater management be complied with by High Properties, as well as the Planning Commission letter dated July 1st, 2022.
I'll second that.
Just a clarification, Randy, on under zoning with the parking, you're indicating that the letter is your choice and not to allow for additional parking?
I didn't see where David Miller's letter said that they couldn't have additional parking. They just asked them to seek the approval of the Board of Supervisors for additional parking, which they would have to do.
And generally, we don't take a position on zoning. The parking is somewhat unique. That's up to generally to the zoning officer or the hearing board and the supervisor.
I mean, I'm certainly willing to make slight adjustment to the motion to recommend to the supervisors that they agree with the parking request submitted by High Properties.
Thank you, Randy. So with that, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
A second.
We have a second from Jerry. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
And unanimous. So thank you. Thank you for your presentation and time this evening and working with staff to get to this point. Next item on the agenda under new business is Paradise Energy Solutions, 2985 Lincoln Highway East. Preliminary final land development plan.
Harbor Engineering. I'm here tonight with Paul Soltis, representing the applicant, Jack Leathers Holdings, and Richard Huber from Huber Buildings. And this is a land development project for property at the northeast corner of Lebanon Road and Route 30. It's currently owned by a gentleman named Ephraim Esch. And it was occupied by American Outback Buildings in the front. Maybe you've seen their storage buildings. They've been there for quite some time. They have a lease that's soon to expire. The property's in the Village Commercial District, and the proposal is for Paradise Energy Solutions to construct a 3-story office building, a little over 30,000 square feet, and a 20,000 square foot warehouse component. So the office building will be 3 stories. And then from the second story, there's quite a bit of grade elevation that falls through the property. It'll present to Leaven Road as a 2-story building. There's a lower level office, and then the warehouse will come from the second story. The access for the property is going to be from Leaven Road. There's an access drive proposed directly across the street from the access to the campground. Levin Road will be widened and the cul-de-sac will be defined currently as just sort of a dead-end road. The cul-de-sac with an emergency access for fire and emergency personnel. Cul-de-sac bulb, curbing and sidewalk are proposed on Levin Road and Route 30. And some intersection improvements are also proposed in Levin Road to widen the radiuses to allow for semi trucks to get in and out of the site, or in and out of Levin Road on Route 30 without crossing the center line. The property will have about 115 parking spaces, loading docks facing to the south, parking throughout, and a number of retaining walls to help make up grade in certain areas of the site. There'll be multiple stormwater facilities. There are 2 infiltration basins. Those are the dark green areas, and there will be underground stormwater infiltration basins underneath portions of the project to be served by public sewer and on-lot water. And as part of the on-lot water, there will be a cistern water tank in the building for fire suppression due to the size. That's pretty much it. It's a pretty straightforward project. We've been through a couple of rounds of reviews with the township staff and David Miller Associates. So we're at a point where we have, I would say, a clean review letter. There are very few, really no technical comments remaining, just a few outstanding items that we're looking for as far as yes, approval, things of that nature. We are asking for a few modifications from both the subdivision land development ordinance and the stormwater, which I can go through. But before I do that, does the planning commission have any questions about what we're proposing in this project?
I think we're okay. We do have a deferral from Leacock Township, since a few square feet in the northern corner.
Very small portions in Laycock Township. We have submitted plans to them and their board of supervisors deferred.
Because it's actually not, well, minimal development there. Actually, it's even,
Part of the road right away.
it's even north of the cul-de-sac pavement, I believe.
Correct. It's a very, very small piece,
Yeah.
less than 1,000 square. Thanks for pointing that
Okay.
out.
If not, we'll go on with the Dave Miller letter. Yeah, we can modify.
So and I'll just run through these briefly and stop me if I'm going too fast, but we're asking for modification for preliminary plans since the plan will be constructed in the phase. Asking for plan scale and the water scale for legibility and constructability. We're asking for a modification of curbing within the site. We are putting curbing, as I mentioned, along Levin Road. I forgot to mention on Levin Road, we're also proposing a row of parallel parking spaces. Which will be within the public right of way. Relate to a later modification. So the curbing on the perimeter is proposed. There are certain areas within the site that we're asking for waivers of curbing where it's not necessary to protect pedestrians from sidewalks and to allow sheet flow for stormwater. We're asking for a modification of building ratios for the homeowners. We have a modification for a cover for one pipe that doesn't have a foot of reinforced concrete pipe. We're asking for a modification to show all modification from the stormwater ordinance and also modification from Saldo. We're asking for a modification for sidewalk placement on public streets. I think you had addressed this with the previous project. Sidewalks inside the public right of way. What we're proposing is along Levin Road, the back of the right of way where a local road comes to the face of the curb and the sidewalk. We're proposed because of the parallel parking that we're showing. So rather than widen the sidewalk and create more area for the township to maintain, we're proposing a pedestrian easement over the sidewalk. So it's still available for public use, but the sidewalk is in an alternate location. And we're asking for modification of 12 inches in size for some of the roof leaders and distribution piping. So those are the modifications. It's not a modification, but we, similar to the last plan too, we had extensive discussions with township staff about the parking on the site. Ultimately, what we ended up using was determine the required parking for office and warehousing, which is more appropriate to this site, and we're right at 125%.
And just a note of the 9 waivers and modifications requested. Dave Miller's letter recommends those all be granted with one exception on the first one, and that is the all requirements of preliminary and final.
Correct, yeah.
With that condition. That's the only one that had a condition. The other recommended to be granted. For Dave Miller's. Comments, questions on the waivers? Or modifications?
I don't have any comments or questions on those, but I would like them to address the planning commission letter because of the extensive comments they provided.
Which
Planning Commission.
Orange County, okay, well, we finished Dave Miller's under zoning. We don't have any issues with that.
You don't.
And then subdivision and development, there were just 5 comments and you have no issue combining in one stormwater with those. So yes, so Randy, yes, the September 6th letter from 2021. I think that may be a bad,
And I've talked about it,
that may be a bad, is that correct? Me?
no, it should be 2022.
I think it should be
Because we committed the plan in
2022.
August.
Yeah, I think that's before you would submit the plan, so just a note that the county's letter memo is September 6th, 2022.
I can run
You've
through
seen
these
it previously?
I have, yeah, just.
All right.
So I'll just run through these one at a time. So the site data should note the public sewer and private water supply are proposed. That has been updated since we have made the submission. The comment number 2, because the applicant is required to provide 47 parking spaces, but is proposing 122 spaces, the township should seek justification for the larger impervious area. And should confirm that it will not serve as outdoor storage space, et cetera. So a couple of modifications have been made since we made the original submission. We actually backed down the parking to 115 based on 125% of the ITU annual. As I mentioned earlier, we feel comfortable that this is the appropriate number of parking spaces for this plan, for this project based on this. Feel that that's been addressed.
Last sentence on that is permeable pavement should be encouraged. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. There's a lot of truck traffic through the site. It's an industrial space, warehouse. We have used porous pavement on many projects where we feel it's appropriate. We don't feel it's appropriate here. We are conveying water to underground stormwater facilities via inlets and filters, which is essentially the same thing as porous pavement. So even if you put down porous pavement, it still counts as an impervious surface and you still have to do stormwater management. So from our standpoint, that's just the conveyance method to get it to a stormwater facility. So that we're getting it there in an alternate way. It's probably more appropriate. Sign number 3, signage should be provided to clarify that the parallel parking on Levin Road is not to be used as temporary overflow parking for adjacent commercial land uses. Designed there are almost 3 additional parking spaces per adjacent residential land user. Consideration should be given to reducing the amount of impervious surface by replacing some of those parallel spaces with landscape bump outs, curb extensions. Again, we've talked about this, I think with staff. We feel that the 17 parking spaces along Levin Road would be a benefit to both the applicant, visitors, or parking that exceeded the capacity of this site in any event. And then it would also, as a benefit, provide parking for your neighbors to use. And we're not proposing any signage, and this also, again, is a discussion for council staff. This is not restricted parking. It's not specific to Paris Energy Solutions. It's open to anybody, first come, first serve. So we feel that the parallel parking would be a benefit in this case. And because it's a dead end road, the cul-de-sac vehicles won't be traveling fast here. We feel like a great place to provide parallel parking. It's easily accessed by the residents and if need be by the business.
Will there be any indication that there's only parking in one direction?
Because it's only on the right-hand side of the road, I think that I don't know if I've ever seen a sign like that. I mean, I suppose somebody could park in the wrong direction, come around the cul-de-sac and pull in there, but that would be
I may be overthinking it, that an employee that wants to get out quick, going to be a lot faster to leave a parking space if you're facing towards Lincoln Highway at the end of the day than getting out of the larger parking lot when the workday's done. And
Yeah, I think they
About-
would park, though, hopefully they would park facing the right direction. If not, probably I'll just send out a company memo to.
that might be good. But you always have the employee that wants to get out first, the one that's standing at the punch clock or whatever. You're smiling. You know what I'm saying.
All of our employees work extra hours.
Yeah. And they're electric cars, right?
Yeah.
Number 4 is about providing a sidewalk, grass strip along the sidewalk along Lincoln Highway. We did update that since we made our submission, so it's consistent. I know trailers to the west, there's a strip of, there will be curbing, grass strip, and the sidewalk. 5 is a recommendation, additional crosswalk pavement striping to be provided for pedestrian access within the parking lot and from the roadway. You know, in this case, we really don't anticipate a lot of pedestrians coming from either Levin Road or Lincoln Highway into the site. There's the access drive itself, which is traversable without a sidewalk. So we didn't feel that a sidewalk was really necessary. Now we do have the sidewalk on Levin Road, and from there is sidewalk connections to the building directly. Number 6 is about a gravel driveway on the eastern property line. That actually is gone. That's referring to a farmland that used to go into an adjacent property through this site. That's no longer there. And then the street name signs location at the intersection of Levin Road and Route 30 should not infringe upon the minimum sidewalk width or impact the sidewalk accessibility. Consideration should be given to either relocating the sign beyond the sidewalk or provide a wider sidewalk within the same area. And I think we'd address that too, the street sign. And so that's not a concern either. So. The last couple of comments about some landscaping, which I think we made some adjustments for that as far as some landscaping proposed beneath the solar carport area. And then please confirm that the truck turning radii will enable trash disposal without needing to provide. And we had submitted truck turning exhibits as part of our application to show that both semi trucks, emergency service providers, and trash trucks can work through the site without impacting landscape items.
Thank you.
So truck traffic would come off of Lincoln Highway on Levin and make the first right
Correct.
to come in.
Correct. And so they would, semi trucks and all trucks would come in. This would be the main access drive into the site. There's a turning area for semi trucks to pull forward through this dumpster area. They would back up. This is a 4-foot loading dock here with and a number of other overhead doors that are at grade for vans or trucks with trailers. And those can maneuver within the space generally in front of those curves.
What if the drivers do and he misses that right turn and goes down Levin Road to your cul-de-sac? Is that large? And you're going to have that gated at the end. If I understand, that would be for fire access. Is that radius big enough that they could turn around?
Well,
And I have a second concern of when you come up of Lincoln Highway and the curve of Levin Road on the left, that's an access to the campgrounds.
right. There's a driveway into Pine Hill Trailers first, and then there's access to the campground directly across from our access drive.
So my other concern is there will be new people potentially coming there. If they miss that turn and go down Levin Road with their fifth wheel, their trailer, et cetera, are they going to be able to turn around and get out of there without having? I'm just
Yes.
concerned that the radii is sufficient in that cul-de-sac to allow for your trucks that may miss the turn, that are bringing deliveries, may not be your employees, but I'm assuming you're going to have supplies delivered by tractor trailer. And then also the campers that, so you don't create a situation that they can't get out.
Right. So currently for Levin Road, it's just a dead end. It doesn't have a cul-de-sac at all. So I guess if somebody missed the campground now, they would probably have to back up down the road. We designed this cul-de-sac ball to meet the township local road standards. So it's got a 50-foot, 100-foot diameter right of way and a 80-foot diameter cul-de-sac bulb. And that's designed so it's large enough for like fire trucks and other apparatus to be able to turn around. We didn't run it, but I would presume that would also work for a car trailer or a camper. Would it work for a semi truck to turn around there? No, but no cul-de-sacs are designed for it. It's still a local road. In the event that that did happen, I guess either they would, speak with Paradise Energy to open the gate to come through, or they would have to back up probably. I think that's unlikely that would happen, but to design a cul-de-sac that a semi truck could turn around would be, I would say, pretty excessive.
Yeah, I agree. Just that your Lebanon Road is a short dead-end road that has both your truck traffic and camper traffic and nowhere to go when you get in there. Yeah. And I can see maybe some of the truckers can back and others don't have that experience. The campers, I know many that require a space in the campground that they can pull through when it's a vehicle and a trailer, so that they don't have to back. It's a challenge of jackknifing instead of backing, but anyway. And just don't want that confusion on there.
I think this will be a vast improvement on the current situation, at least for the.
Oh, yeah.
And the flexibility of the gate. We need to open it so they can make a pass through.
Yeah.
Not expect to happen that often. It should work.
Can you talk about the signage along the front? I think there's a billboard, is that gonna remain, or what's gonna happen with the signage?
Yeah, I think we were just going to relocate the signs that are already there. One for Country Acre Campgrounds, one is for, I can't remember the other
There's
one.
an American Outback sign that's there now that has to go away. Country Acres has a specific easement area that we'll have to relocate in, and then Gish's Furniture is a billboard lease agreement, so that'll be relocated as necessary off the road.
And then relocating, just pushing back just enough so that we can accommodate the curb on the sidewalk along.
Yeah, I just want to say that I don't need a variance because the sign ordinance says you can only have one freestanding sign per street frontage. So that there's going to be two already there. If the business wants another sign there, a sign for the business,
Okay.
they would have to get a variance for that.
I think you're gonna have signage just on the building, Paul, from what I understand.
I don't know that we've really talked about that. Are you saying a variance would be needed even for at the Leavenworth Road entrance or out along 30? At the Leavenworth Road 30 intersection, or just
Well, not as long as there isn't any signage on Levin Road, you could have a sign there.
okay.
On Lincoln Highway, since there's going to be the campground sign and the billboard, then you would have to get a variance for along Lincoln Highway because the sign ordinance says one freestanding sign per street frontage. I think the maximum is two, so you could have one along Levin Road as long as there's no signage there. But along Lincoln Highway, you'd have to go for a variance to put a freestanding sign there.
But the existing signs can stay, is that correct? Like the two existing signs that are there, they're just getting moved back just a few feet to accommodate the sidewalk. That would not require variance, right? Because they're existing.
That wouldn't require a variance, just any new signage.
New signs.
Yeah, it's good to know. I don't know that we've really gotten to that point yet of figuring out where we want the signage. Good to know.
Any other comments? Questions?
I have one question, I guess. So you have a couple residential properties across the street. What kind of lighting are you proposing for the parking areas, and are those residential properties protected from those people aren't looking into lights, let's put it that way.
Yeah, so the lighting design is designed with the full cutoffs for the ordinance and the foot candle, like kind of net zero property lines, and then there's along the street. So they'll also be looking down because the houses are quite a bit higher than the property, and then the building itself is going to provide a good buffer. So I guess my best answer is between the grade elevation of the building and then the lighting meeting the township requirements. There will be lighting. They're not going to see lighting, but nothing's going to be shining directly at those houses. They will have cutoffs.
Thank you.
One more comment about the sign. If you are moving both those signs, they will need building code. You need a sign permit application for this because they will need to be inspected for footers.
Okay. Okay.
So to move them, you would need permits, and for if the business wants to put another freestanding sign, obviously they'll need permits for that. But to move those signs, they would have to abide by today's wind load.
Okay.
David, for my knowledge, and there's, if the sign is larger than the current code, though it's existing and they're just moving it, is that an issue or not?
Well, since I don't have that information in front of me, I think that billboard. Well, he wouldn't be allowed a billboard in today's ordinance there. So if the township agrees to move it, they would just need to get the building code inspection. Same with the campground sign. It would be an off-premise sign. So the ordinance doesn't allow that. But if there's an agreement to just move those signs, they would just, it was just be a building code issue.
Just as a side note, the ordinance today is smaller signs than previous. So when you're thinking of your sign, make sure you check on how big. You can't put the biggest one out for you today because, yeah, anyway, do a little checking before you jump.
Not to get off too far off track, but as far as signage on the building itself, could that also be an issue for us, or is that
As long as you
just following the ordinance?
building sign, as long as you just follow the sign ordinance, that shouldn't be an issue. It's the freestanding signs that are a lot more involved.
Any other questions, comments from Planning Commission? Comments or questions from the audience? Having and seeing none. No further. I'll look for a motion.
It's really according to our paperwork here, so this is an easy one, isn't it?
Could be.
That's what you do to it.
I'll make a motion.
So. To approve this letter dated November 9th, 2022, as well as a letter from the County Planning Commission, a letter actually dated September 6th, 2022. Yeah, it's referenced in that letter as well.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second,
And a second, any discussion? Not. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
I may just, on a side note, are you moving your whole operation to this building from your other? You're just down Lincoln Highway a little further. I believe.
Lincoln Highway, right now, the plan is to move to Paradise Energy Solutions. And have upward and stay in the current building. That's the current plan.
And I'm sorry, have what stay?
Upward broadband would be the wireless internet service provider.
Oh, okay.
Currently using part of that building. But now they would stay as a Paradise Energy.
Thank you. Next item. First Church of Nazarene, 2150 New Holland Pike, final subdivision plan. Welcome.
My name is TJ Costa. I'm with Lancaster Civil Engineering Company. Here with Mr. Mark Justice, pastor of First Church of the Nazarene. I'll make this as short and sweet. It's a fairly simple plan. So I'll move forward here. So again, it's a final subdivision plan. You can see it on the screen for the First Church of the Nazarene. It's located at 2115 New Holland Pike. The existing property contains a church building and on the lower right corner of the plan there, an unoccupied dwelling that the church no longer has been used for. The existing lot is about 7.9 acres. Existing property access for the church is off of New Holland Pike, located at the top of the plan. That is the primary means of egress and ingress, and the property also connects to Shireen Road down on the lower corner. That entrance is currently cut off, restricted. There's, I think there are like posts, metal posts that are currently blocking the road, so no one can get through. So that's the existing layout. And I don't have anything more to say for that. So the proposed layout, which is on the next sheet, this subdivides off lower unused dwelling, bottom corner of the lot. That lower lot is about 0.9 acres. So the residual property will remain at about 6.8, what the net amount ends up being. For that lot one, there are several easements that are related to it. There's actually 3 different easements that will be shown. The first one that is shown there is a cross-access easement. This is to allow access to the property from Shireen Road. Those metal posts that are currently there will be removed and relocated slightly further up the access drive so that there is not through access from Shireen to the church. Second easement in this location is a utility easement. There's on the very small corner of the residual lot, water and sewer lines that will remain on the residual lot. So there's utility easement that's proposed in that location to encompass those. And then the third easement is a snow stockpile easement for the very end of Shireen, just for use by the township, for the public works department, for the snow removal in that area. There is a small strip of right of way that is being dedicated on New Holland Pike, at the very top of the plan. See where it says the proposed concrete monuments, small strip of land there. It's just to meet the difference on the requirements. That's really it for the existing proposed layout. Are there any questions on that at this point? If not, then we do have a comment letter from the engineer from BMA, which we do plan to address these comments. At this point, we foresee no issues addressing the main comments that are on these plans. I'm happy to either review these comments, if we go for them. I'm also happy to review any labor modifications required. If you so desire.
Well, under the Dave Miller letter, we have it here, November 9th, the first waiver was preliminary plan, and the recommendation is to grant that request to submit as a final, as long as you meet the requirements of both preliminary and final.
That's correct.
Second item are curbs along both sides of all proposed streets is a requirement. The applicant requested a deferral of the curbing requirements related to the frontage along New Holland Pike, which, as you said, is where the entrance to the church property is. And it's recommended a deferral be granted for curbing until such time as East Lampeter Township Board of Supervisors directs that be installed. Now, it had a condition there of doing a grading plan and showing that, and you're okay with.
Yes, so a little sidewalk and curb exhibit was submitted to township. I don't know if we have it here in this. I don't think we do, but we have no problem preparing and submitting now showing the limits that would be deferred for the location of curbs.
That would require a written deferral agreement
Correct.
between the owner and the township. And the third item are sidewalks. And a deferral. Curbing requirements among the project. I assume that's to be deferral of sidewalks. I recommend a deferral request relating to installation of sidewalks be granted. And with the condition of a grading plan.
Correct.
So be consistent for the curbing and sidewalks.
Does that conflict with something the county said, or is that a different issue? County.
Yeah, the county apparently saw something asking for a waiver.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Did you request a waiver at any point?
I don't believe we requested a waiver. I think it's just been the deferral.
Yeah, I think that may have been a mistake on the
Yeah,
county's part.
this time, no, but.
Yeah. But my understanding that a deferral was requested throughout, so the county may have just misread that or, yeah. So actually, they're recommending deferral in their number 2. And that's what was requested and being recommended by Dave Miller's letter. So it's consistent with the exception of the county saying a waiver was requested.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. And then well, yeah, actually, the fourth item is they ought to be shown on the plan. And then there were 4 items under subdivision and land development. And I believe the first item you've taken care of, the closure of the boundaries. The easements you referenced. Are those easements all, those easements for this plus or minus an acre would all be on the remaining church property?
That's correct.
Okay. And those easements were for snow removal and access to this property.
Correct. Snow removal access and utilities.
Because Shireen currently ends at the church property.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then this 0.86 acres, just the northeast. The northeast corner touches the southwest corner of the right of way. Okay.
Yep, that's correct.
So the easement would be required to give access to the property.
Yes.
And the financial security is the third item. The residual lot would be used to online disposal. Oh, and then the fourth one is an on-lot disposal system for the future. And I believe you spoke with the township already to have that checked.
Correct, yes, we have performed the on-site probe as well as the percolation tests. Those were just recently completed. I think that Marvin should have the results at this point. So again, coordinating that, we'll have the location for proposed replacement shown on the plan.
So having all that information would be good before you go to the supervisors. for clarity. And as Sherry mentioned, that we have the county review of September 21st, 2022. Shared access agreement should be provided and reported. And that will be done. I mean, we discussed that item too. We already discussed that as being a deferral and not a waiver. And then revised deeds for the resultant lots, should be recorded as part of the plan approval. We have no issues with those.
We have no issues with those.
Any questions, comments from the planning commission?
None from me.
If not, I believe we're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the final subdivision plan for the First Church of the Nazarene. 50 Road. 2-103.18. Approval consists of the items included in the letter from David Miller Associates dated November 9, 2022. Also the letter from the county planning department. The letter dated September 21st, 2022. I'll submit that for.
We have the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second, any discussion? If not, all those in favor, say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, are you here for a specific?
I was just observing and I saw the briefing items. I'm one of the family members.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know if my engineer was gonna be here or not.
Well, yeah. Before we went to the briefing items, I was going to let you share any questions you had, but it's after your interest. We'll move on to the briefing items. And the
Sure.
being, well, Colin.
1891 Windy Hill Road, just a simple lot add-on plan that you'll see in the near future. And then the second one is the Whitmer tract on 458 Mount Sydney Road. It's a 14 lot subdivision. So you'll be seeing both of those plans in the near future.
Items. That's just shared with the planning commission, so we have some knowledge of what things would be in the future. When there is not somebody present on those items to do any presentation at this point.
It would be, it's just saying, hey, we're gonna get that on your agenda.
Yeah, and it may be next month, it may be a couple of months, depends when the applicant's ready with a formal submission for our review.
Okay.
Sometimes we don't see it for 6 months, depending on things that happen. So it's,
Well, this might be the case too, because part of the property lies in Westland Theater, or the majority of the property could be subdivided lies in Westland Theater, so it might be more of a, obviously, Eastland Theater needs to sign off as well, but it's might be more of a briefing item, like you said, so.
yeah, and as you may have heard on one of the earlier ones this evening, there was a small portion in Lake Hawk Township that they deferred. It was almost non-existent in Lake Hawk, but others vary depending on how much land is in each, or whether, even if most of it's in another municipality, but our sewer serves it, or et cetera, then we have more interest.
There's impact.
what the impact is right, on the extent of our review or no review.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other business, none on the agenda, any from here? Announcements? Last meeting of the year. So, I'll see you all next year. All refreshed and healthy.
We hope.
Hopefully, we're all here healthy, right?
I just need to stay away from my granddaughter.
So if not, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have the motion. I believe Jerry has a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Ayes have it. So moved. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Happy holidays, everybody.